Welcome back to part two of the photosynthesis lectures. Today we're actually going to focus on the site of photosynthesis. So, we learned about the plant in the last lecture. Where does photosynthesis take place, and explain why you think this? You can pause here and then you'll get back. Photosynthesis actually takes place inside the plant cell's chloroplast. Now, if you look at that bottom right image, you can see the rectangular plant cell right here. And all these green dots right here are all microscopic views of chloroplasts that are found inside the plant cell. In just a little bit, we're going to go over why chlorophyll is usually green. But first, let's go into the chloroplast itself. It's highly folded. It's got a highly folded inner membrane. And all that does is you're increasing the surface area, the amount of surfaces that can be in contact at one point. So the reaction rate is going to increase. And you could fit all this in a tinier space than if you were to unravel all of it and let it just sit there in one layer. Now, if you look on the inside, you have arrangement of stacks of sacs called grana. Now, granum is that whole entire stack of green little pancake-looking things. A single one is called a grana, and the whole stack itself is called a thylakoid. Now, the really cool thing is all of this, I like to think of it as like a solar cell. You're sitting there soaking up the sun, and you're going to turn it into energy later on. So why is the inside of the chloroplast highly folded? Hopefully you were paying attention to me. You can pause the video now and you can try out your answer. Hopefully you came up with the idea that it's highly folded to increase surface area, which is going to increase the rate of photosynthesis or the reaction that's going to happen. And you're going to see that highly folded idea increasing surface area at multiple points throughout the year to come. Now, chloroplasts, they contain that chlorophyll, and I told you I was going to explain why they actually look green. And it's because chlorophyll can absorb all colors except for green and some wavelengths of yellow. Now, when you absorb something, that means that you're not going to see it. But because our eyes work based on how light is reflected off of the object, and that's what our brain reads, that's why we see plant leaves usually green. Sometimes you may see that some plants are red or their leaves are red all year, and that's simply because there's a second type of chlorophyll called chlorophyll B. But sometimes during the fall, when plants stop producing chlorophyll A or B, you actually get to see the other colors that's going on. So when chlorophyll is not being produced, you get to see those nice undertone colors such as the reds, the oranges, the yellows. Really cool. Fun fact, just you can explain them to all your friends and have fun impressing them. Plants are not the only organisms that can actually make their own food. All autotrophs can, and you can actually classify autotrophs in many different ways. But essentially, some non-other plants that you may be familiar with are actually the algae that's found on that picture on the upper left-hand side. That's actually a man's hand that he stuck his hand in some water and picked up some algae. Algae are single-celled plants. They have chlorophyll. They go through the process of photosynthesis, just like this single-celled organism, which is a euglena on the bottom over here. They also contain chlorophyll and go through photosynthesis. They live in freshwater areas. So justify and explain the type of light that would be the worst for growing plants. Pause here, and you can try and come back for the answer. So hopefully after that little activity that we did in class, that we manipulated all the different type of lights while growing different types of plants, and you recorded your information, taught you a little bit about the fact that green light is terrible for growing plants, considering if it's reflecting all the green light, it's not going to absorb any of it. But the best actual lights for growing plants are blue and red, and purple's up there because purple's a mixture of blue and red. But to summarize everything, plants basically trap light during the day from the sun, and they use the light energy to make food in the form of glucose. Now, that food, next week, we're going to learn how we take that glucose molecule, put it inside the mitochondria, and break it down to get ATP. Now, the general equation for photosynthesis, this is the balanced equation, so you're going to see coefficients there, is sunlight plus carbon dioxide plus water is going to yield and give you glucose, more water, and oxygen. This reaction only happens in the presence of enzymes and sunlight. So enzymes, remember, they're a specific type of proteins that are going to help speed the chemical reaction by lowering the energy required to do them. So in photosynthesis, in order to use energy in sunlight, plant cells convert light energy and inorganic carbon dioxide to glucose. Now that glucose is actually going to be the usable product of their process of photosynthesis, and then we're going to break it down even further. That glucose is going to get converted into usable ATP, adenosine triphosphate, during cellular respiration, with energy stored in the chemical bonds between each of the phosphates. So these are the each phosphates, but when you actually use ATP, you're going to end up breaking this last phosphate group off, and you're going to end up with ADP and the one phosphate that comes off. But that release of immense energy is actually what's going to be used for other cellular processes. So what do you need for photosynthesis? You have to start with sunlight, water, and carbon dioxide. And you're always going to come up with glucose, C6H12O6, and oxygen released but used during aerobic respiration. And that's what we're going to talk. Aerobic respiration is cellular respiration. We're going to talk about that next week. And you're actually going to give off a little bit of water vapor. Now, what's glucose for? Glucose, again, just to reiterate myself, is used for cellular respiration in the mitochondria, and it's going to make ATP, which is usable energy. Or it's used for synthesis of other molecules, such as fats, proteins, and by used for, I mean it's going to be a building block. It's also going to provide that energy. Or it's going to be stored in plants such as starch. And you could think of corn. Corn, there are undigestible parts of corn are actually cellulose, which is a complex carbohydrate made from glucose. And then you also have the starchy product that we actually eat, and we get the energy from corn. If you think about it, they're high energy. All right, I hope this whole entire lecture was interesting and helped you out. And if you have any questions, come to class with them.